This is English Through Stories, Episode 1 of Missing Person. Welcome to the first episode of English Through Stories, Missing Person. This program is for intermediate and advanced learners of English who are looking for a fun, relaxing way to improve their listening comprehension and their speaking. My name is Dr. Jeff McQuillan. I'm your host, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. The format of English Through Stories is very simple. We will begin by recapping or reviewing the previous episode for all of the episodes except the first one, such as today. Then we will read part of the story, and the story is going to be a dramatic story, what we would call in English a melodrama, where there is lots of emotion and romance and sometimes murder, all sorts of interesting things happening to people. Another word we give to this kind of drama in English is a soap opera. So this is essentially a soap opera in English. We'll be reading one part of the story each week. After that, we will stop and explain and go over some of the story that may have been difficult, talk about some expressions and vocabulary, and so forth. As you're listening to the story, don't worry about trying to understand every word, but rather try to get the general meaning of the story. Now let's get started with Episode 1 of Missing Person. It's entitled, The Man in the Mask. I didn't kill him. I didn't even plan to kill him. I had a gun, but I just wanted to hurt him and to stop him from attacking me. I had no idea why this stranger was hitting me, and it was ticking me off. This morning, Ann Prado, one of my students at the University of Southwestern California, came to my office. She said she had a problem and she needed my help. Her sister, Sarah, was missing. We were on our way to Sarah's apartment to find her when halfway up the front steps of the building, a man ran toward me and started punching me. I hit the man in the ear. He screamed with pain. He was small, but a tough son of a gun. I stepped back and hit him hard in the stomach. "Oh my God," he moaned. I think I hurt him that time. I knew he was in pain. I pushed him down to the ground. He fell onto the grass in front of the steps of the apartment building. Now it was my turn to take control. I stood over him and asked, "Who are you? What do you want?" He didn't answer. He had a ski hat on, so I couldn't see his face. "Just get the hell away from this apartment building. You're not welcome here," he said. I grabbed him by the shirt, pushed his face into the ground, and put his arm behind his back. He yelled even louder now. I think he was finally ready to stop fighting. "Now who are you? Why can't I go inside the apartment?" I was getting angry and wanted some answers. I saw a few people come out of the apartment building to see what was happening. But the man didn't say a word. He lifted himself up suddenly and pushed me away. He looked at me coldly for a second, then ran into the street. I turned to find Anne to make sure she was okay. "Do you know who he was? Have you seen him before?" I asked. "No, Dr. Reeves. I don't come to my sister's apartment very often. I don't know who he is. Let me back up a minute." This morning, in my office, Anne had explained that 2 days ago she was supposed to have lunch with her sister, Sarah Salas. When her sister didn't come to the restaurant, Anne called Sarah's apartment. There was no answer. Anne went to her sister's apartment right away and knocked on the door, but there was no one home. She called Sarah's work. Sarah's boss told Anne that she had been missing for 2 days. So Anne decided to ask me to help find her sister and her sister's husband, Bill, who was also missing. Our episode began with the narrator, or the person telling the story, saying that he didn't kill him. We begin in the middle of a fight between two men. One of them, our narrator, has a gun. The other one, a stranger, or someone who he didn't know, was hitting him, attacking him. Our narrator, whose name is Dr. Reeves, we find out later, says that this man is hitting him, and it's ticking him off. To tick someone off means to make them very, very angry. It's an informal expression. If you say I'm ticked off, that means I'm mad, I'm angry, or that person really ticks me off. He really makes me angry. Again, it's informal, but fairly common. Now, our narrator, Dr. Reeves, is a professor at the University of Southwestern California. Not a real university, of course, but this is a story. One of his students, Anne Prado, came to his office and said that she had a problem. Her sister, Sarah, was missing. To be missing means that no one knows where you are. We sometimes use the expression, "it's gone missing," meaning a person or a thing is somehow can't be found, and we don't know where it is. The narrator, Dr. Reeves, and Anne decided to go over to Sarah's apartment. While they were on their way to the apartment, halfway up the front steps of the building, a man ran toward Dr. Reeves and started punching him. The expression "to be on your way" means that you are traveling towards something. I'm on my way to the store and I decide to stop and get gasoline. So I'm traveling in a direction, some particular direction, or to some place. Halfway up the front steps would be, of course, not the bottom, not the top, halfway. Someone came and started punching our narrator. The narrator, Dr. Reeves, hits the man back in the ear. He describes him as small but a tough son of a gun. A son of a gun is a nicer way of saying a vulgar expression, which is son of a, and the last word begins with a B. Son of a gun is a nicer way of saying son of a B, but it still has the same basic meaning, which is this is a bad person. This is someone who I don't like very much. Dr. Reeves steps back, or moves backwards, and hits the man in the stomach. The man cries, "Oh my God!" This is a common expression probably in lots of different languages. "Oh my God" means is something you would say when you're surprised or you're angry, or in this case, you're hurt. The man moaned. To moan, M-O-A-N, is a verb which means to go, "oh." That is to moan. Usually we moan in pain. Dr. Reeves says that he knew the man was in pain, and he pushed him to the ground. The ground is another word for the earth. The man fell on the grass, and Dr. Reeves started to question him or ask him questions. Who are you? What do you want? The man had a ski hat on, and so he couldn't see the man's face. A ski hat is a hat that covers your entire head and your face and just has little, we would call them slits for the eyes or holes, and one for the mouth, sometimes usually one for the nose. It's what people wear when they go skiing down the mountain in order to keep warm. But they're also associated, or we also see them on criminals who are trying to prevent other people from seeing who they are. The man yells at Dr. Reeves, "Just get the hell away from this apartment building. You're not welcome here." The expression "get the hell away" or "get the hell out of here" is a vulgar expression. It means basically the person is very angry. When you see or hear that expression, get the hell away from me, get the hell out of here. These are all angry, vulgar expressions that you are communicating or telling someone you're angry with them. Notice it's not get hell away, but get the hell away. That's just the way the expression goes. The man tells Dr. Reeves he's not welcome here, meaning he doesn't want him here. Dr. Reeves then grabs him by the shirt. Notice the expression to grab by. You could grab someone by their ear, you could grab them by their nose, or you, in this case, grab them by your shirt. He pushes the man to the ground, and he twists his arm. To twist, T-W-I-S-T, means to turn something, but to twist someone's arm means to take their arm and turn it so that it hurts. In this case, he twisted the arm behind his back. He was trying to get the man to stop fighting and to give him some answers. Again, Dr. Reeves asked the man why he can't go in the apartment building, but the man didn't say a word. In the expression, "I didn't say a word," we mean, of course, they were completely silent. Not even one word did they speak. The man looked at Dr. Reeves coldly. To look at someone coldly means to look at them somewhat in anger or somewhat in perhaps fear. To look at someone coldly is usually because you're looking at someone in anger. The man then got up and ran away. The doctor then turned to see if he could find Anne and asked if she was okay, and she said that she was. Dr. Reeves then asked her if she knew the man, and Anne said, "No, I don't come here very often, and I don't know who he is." The story ends, or the first episode ends, with a recap of what happened. The narrator tells us that this morning in his office, Anne Prado came and said that her sister had been missing for 2 days. When Anne's sister, Sarah, didn't come to a lunch appointment they had, didn't show up, we would say, Anne decided to call her sister, but there was no answer. When you're calling on the telephone and there is no answer, as you probably know, that means no one picked up or answered the telephone. Anne then went over to her sister's apartment and knocked on the door. To knock is like that, to knock on the wood. But there was no one home. Once again, that's an expression we would use if no one is in the house. There's no one home. Then Anne called Sarah's work, and Sarah the sister who's missing, her boss told Anne that she had been missing for 2 days. That's why Anne decided to go and ask Dr. Reeves for his help, because the sister's husband, Bill, is also missing. In the next episode of Missing Person, we'll find out more about Dr. Reeves and the mysterious case of Sarah Salas, who's missing. Be sure to come back next week for Episode 2, Beer and Cigarettes. For English Through Stories, I'm Jeff McQuillan. See you next time. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 2, Beer and Cigarettes. You're listening to Episode 2 of Missing Persons on English Through Stories. I'm your host, Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. In Episode 1, we meet Anne Prado, a university student at the University of Southwestern California in Los Angeles. Anne has a sister, Sarah Salas, but for some reason, Anne can't locate or find her sister. She appears to have disappeared or is missing. So she goes and asks her professor, Dr. Reeves, to help her find her sister. The professor and Anne go over to Sarah's apartment, but before they can get to the door, Dr. Reeves is attacked by another man who starts fighting with him. The man eventually runs away. We also learn that Sarah's husband, Bill, is also missing. Now, Episode 2, Missing Persons, Beer and Cigarettes. Some of my students know I'm an amateur detective. Before I became a university professor 5 years ago, I had a real job. I worked for a security agency that protected private homes, and also important people like famous actors and politicians. I learned a lot about criminals. I also learned a lot about police work from my father, who was a cop for 34 years. I had wanted to become a police officer too, but that was impossible. I got into some trouble when I was a kid. It was a stupid high school trick, but because I was 18 years old, I was treated like an adult. I was arrested by the police, convicted, and now I have a police record. With a criminal record, I can never be a cop. I worked for a while as a bodyguard. One of my cases was protecting a famous politician who was also a history buff. He and I became friends. He helped me go to college, and now I am a professor. As I said, when Anne came to see me this morning, I told her I would be happy to help. We came over to the apartment building where Sarah and Bill live, and that's when this mysterious man tried to stop us from going in. Let's see if we can get into their apartment and take a look around, I suggested. We walked into the large white building and up to the 3rd floor. Anne got an extra key from the apartment manager so we could get in. Apartment 306, Anne? I asked her. Yes, here's the key, she answered. Let me open the door. I took the key from her. I opened the door very slowly. One thing I learned from my work as a bodyguard: be careful when opening a stranger's door. You never know what's behind it. I opened the door slowly. I went in first, making sure everything was okay before Anne followed. The living room was large and full of expensive things. A big screen TV, a fancy stereo, a CD player, 2 big brown leather chairs, and a comfortable-looking sofa. The living room alone was bigger than my entire apartment. My God, it smells like beer and cigarettes in here. Bill and Sarah didn't even smoke, Anne said. I walked to the back of the apartment and saw myself in the mirror. I'm always surprised at how I look. I'm 42 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, balding, average weight. But when I see myself in the mirror, I look 3 inches shorter, 5 years older, and 10 pounds heavier. I checked the windows and the closet on each side of the apartment and went into the bathroom. Then I saw something move. I quickly turned to Anne and put my hand up in the air, meaning don't move. I put my finger to my lips, telling her to be quiet. Someone was in the bathroom. This episode begins with our narrator, the person telling the story, Dr. Reeves, talking a little bit about his own background. He starts by saying that he's an amateur detective. An amateur is someone who doesn't necessarily get paid to do what they do. Someone who gets paid is called a professional. A detective, of course, is someone who tries to find a criminal or tries to find information. Dr. Reeves explained that he has been a university professor for 5 years. Before that, he worked for a security agency that protected private homes and important people. A security agency, an agency is a company here that provides protection to either a building or homes or to people. We call people who work for a security agency a security guard. In any case, the narrator says that his father was also a police officer for 34 years. The term he uses is a cop. A cop, C-O-P, is an informal expression, or term rather, means police officer, someone working for the police. Our narrator also wanted to become a police officer, but something happened. He doesn't tell us what. He says it was a stupid high school trick. A trick is here something that you do to someone else, usually, something mean, something bad. We don't know what that was, but because the narrator was 18 years old, which in the United States is the legal age, he was treated like an adult. To treat someone like is the expression that we use when we're talking about how we act toward someone. Sometimes we say, don't treat me like a child, meaning don't act towards me like I'm a child or talk to me like I am a child. The narrator was arrested by the police. When the police arrest you, they put handcuffs on you and take you to the police station. That's where the police work, in a police station. They convicted him, means he went to a trial in front of a judge and a jury, and the jury said he was guilty. To be found guilty is to be convicted. The opposite would be to be acquitted. To be acquitted means you're innocent. Now Dr. Reeves has a police record. When we say someone has a police record, a criminal record, or sometimes we just say he has a record, we mean that they've committed some crime. And so in the computer, if you look that person's name up, their name will come up with the name of their crime. Having a criminal record or police record means that there are some jobs that you can no longer apply for or get. And becoming a cop, according to Dr. Reeves, is one of those. The professor explains that he worked as a bodyguard. Well, a bodyguard is very much the same as a security guard, except when we say bodyguard, we mean someone protecting a person, not a place. So the President of the United States has bodyguards. We actually call those bodyguards the Secret Service. But for normal private citizens, it would be a bodyguard. Dr. Reeves was the bodyguard for a famous politician who was also a history buff. A buff of something, B-U-F-F, is a noun. It refers to a person who likes a particular topic, usually as a hobby. So you could be a art buff, meaning you like to go and look at art, or a theater buff, meaning you like to go to the theater. It's like a fan. Now, Dr. Reeves explains, because of this famous person who protected him, he became a history professor himself. He got interested in history. We then return to the story, and we are now back at the apartment building where Sarah Salas and her husband Bill, who are missing, live. Dr. Reeves suggests to Anne that they should go into the apartment and take a look around. To take a look around means to look closely in a particular area, usually when you are looking for something, and often when it's a place that you haven't been to before. But more generally, when you are looking for something, you can take a look around, meaning try to find that particular thing or person. Dr. Reeves and Anne go up into the apartment on the 3rd floor. Anne gets the key and gives it to Dr. Reeves. She says, "Here's the key." That's the expression we use often when we give something to someone. Here's your pen. Here is your whatever it happens to be. We use that when we're giving something to someone often. Dr. Reeves opens the door very slowly because it is a stranger's door. A stranger is someone that you don't know. The room was full of many expensive things. A big screen TV, you can guess, a television with a large screen, 30, 50, 60 inches, however big they are. There was a fancy stereo. Something that's fancy is something that, in this case, is expensive. It has a lot of additional features, different things it can do. That would be something that is fancy. Anne says that it smells like beer and cigarettes in the apartment. And she points out that Bill and Sarah didn't even smoke. The story ends, this episode ends, with Dr. Reeves going into the back of the apartment, talking about how he looks in the mirror. He says that he's 42 years old, 5 feet 11 inches, and that's how we give height. We say I'm 6'3", means I'm 6'3" He's balding, and to be balding, of course, means that you're losing your hair or don't have any hair. He checks the windows and the closets in the apartment, and then begins to go into the bathroom. But he stops because he sees something move. He then turns to Anne and puts his hand up in the air. So he takes his hand and indicates for Anne to stop. Then he puts his finger to his lips, indicating that she should be quiet. Why? Because someone is in the bathroom. That concludes episode 2, Beer and Cigarettes of Missing Person. Be sure to visit our new website at www.englishthroughstories.com. We also have 2 other podcasts you may be interested in. English as a Second Language podcast at www.eslpod.com, and the TOEFL podcast at www.toeflpod.com. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. Thanks for listening. Come back for the next episode of Missing Person. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 3, A Woman in Pain. Welcome back to English Through Stories, Episode 3 of Missing Person. I'm your host, Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. In the previous episode of Missing Person, we learned that our narrator, the person telling the story, Dr. Reeves, is a university professor and an amateur detective. One of his students asked him for his help to find her missing sister, Sarah. The detective, the professor, Dr. Reeves, and the woman go over to the sister's apartment, and they find that there is nothing there, no evidence to tell them what happened. They then hear at the very end of the episode a noise coming from another side of the apartment. That's where we left off in the second episode. Now we continue with episode 3 of Missing Person, A Woman in Pain. I put my hand on my gun and slowly opened the door wider. I saw nothing. I carefully picked up a towel from the floor. Nothing. There must be someone in the bathroom, I thought. In one fell swoop, I kicked the shower curtain back. "Don't move," I shouted. Suddenly, a little white cat jumped out of the bathtub and scurried between my legs. A cat. I should have known. "Oh, Jasmine, I forgot about you," Anne said. The cat looked happy to see her. She took her into the kitchen. I poked around the rest of the bedroom and then followed Anne into the kitchen. "Does the cat have any food left in her dish?" I asked. "It's almost gone." "Poor Jasmine, you must be hungry." "Well, Bill and Sarah haven't been gone long, we know that." I walked over to the telephone answering machine and checked their messages. No one had called. We continued looking through the 3-bedroom apartment. There was no sign of any violence, no burglary, no break-in. I checked the master bedroom, and I saw nothing unusual. A beer bottle, photos of Bill and Sarah's wedding, some dirty clothes, an old Time magazine. Next to the bed, on the night table, there was a bottle of pills. "Anne, what are these pills for?" "I think they're for Bill's leg. He messed up his leg playing football in college at USC, Anne replied. I put the bottle back on the table and sat down on the bed to think. I had no idea what happened to Ann's sister and her brother-in-law. They seemed to have just disappeared into thin air. They didn't call anyone. There was no sign of any crime in their apartment. No one at their jobs had seen them for 2 days. Where could they be? Well, Anne, I don't see anything here to help us. I think we should talk to the police again. But I've tried the police, Dr. Reeves. They told me to fill out some forms and wait. They won't do anything. That's why I went to you for help. She began to cry a little. I stopped and looked at her for a second. God, I thought, this poor kid, 22, and in such pain. Okay, well, we won't find anything else here. Let's go, I said to her. Just then I heard a telephone ringing. I turned to the phone on the table, but there was no sound. Then I saw Anne reach into her purse. It was her cellular telephone. That's my cell phone, Dr. Reeves, Anne said. Hello? I watched Anne's face as she answered the phone. First it was happy, then worried, then very sad. Right. 10 minutes. Yes. See you there. Bye. Anne hung up and looked at me in fear. That was Bill. Something terrible has happened. Our episode begins with Dr. Reeves slowly opening the door to the bathroom with his gun in his hand. He says that in one fell swoop, I kicked the shower curtain back. The expression in one fell, F-E-L-L, swoop, S-W-O-O-P, means all in one action, when you do something quickly all at the same time, in one fell swoop. We often use this expression when more than one thing happens because of a single action. In this case, Dr. Reeves kicks the shower curtain back. The shower curtain, of course, is when you have a shower where you bathe, and you have a curtain on the outside so that water doesn't come outside of the shower. He shouted into the bathroom, "Don't move." Suddenly, a little white cat jumped out of the bathtub, all one word. Sometimes we just say the tub, T-U-B, is a place where you can sit and take a bath. The cat scurried between his legs. To scurry, S-C-U-R-R-Y, means to run quickly. Usually we describe an animal with short legs that runs quickly, like a cat. If they move suddenly, we may say they scurried. Often scurried means that they're trying to get away from you or get away from something. Dr. Reeves says, I should have known. This is a very common expression in English. I should have known, meaning I should have known better. I should have known what was going to happen. The cat's name is Jasmine, and Anne recognizes her, and the cat goes to Anne. Anne, of course, is the student of Dr. Reeves, whose sister is gone missing. Dr. Reeves says that he poked around the rest of the bedroom and then went into the kitchen. To poke around, P-O-K-E, in this case the past tense, I poked around, means to look around, usually when you are looking for something specific or you are just trying to see what is there. You could say, for example, I poked around in my desk drawer trying to find a scissors. Means I looked around, not necessarily in an organized way. Dr. Reeves asks Anne if the cat had any food left in her dish. Notice the expression, is there any food left? L-E-F-T. That means, is there any food remaining? When you say, is there any left, you are asking or implying that there was some before and that it ran out, or to run out means to no longer have any left. The cat dish is in fact empty, and Jasmine must be hungry, Anne says. Dr. Reeves concludes that Bill and Sarah haven't been gone long, since, of course, the cat is still alive, even though there is no food left in her dish. Dr. Reeves walks over to the answering machine, or the telephone answering machine. That's, of course, a little machine you have connected to your phone to take messages. When people call you, they leave a message. But no one had called. He looked around more in the 3-bedroom apartment. We often use the number of bedrooms to describe an apartment, not the square footage. In some countries, they'll say, well, it's 500 square feet. But in the United States, we usually talk about the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. It's a 2-bedroom apartment, or we might say it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. This is a 3-bedroom apartment. Dr. Reeves says that there was no burglary, no break-in. A burglary, B-U-R-G-L-A-R-Y, is when someone steals something from you. The person who steals something from you is sometimes called a burglar, B-U-R-G-L-A-R. That's the person who commits or does a burglary when you steal something. You can steal something from a car, from a person, from a house. All of those could be burglaries. A break-in is when someone enters your house without you knowing it and without you wanting it. So a burglar will often break in to a house. A break-in is just for a house or an apartment. When a robber or someone trying to steal things goes into your apartment or house. Dr. Reeves checks the master bedroom. The master bedroom is the name we give the main bedroom, the largest bedroom. If you're in a house with, say, 2 parents and 3 children, the parents would sleep in the master bedroom. It's the biggest bedroom. And usually we talk about, with the master bedroom, the master bath. That's the bathroom that's usually inside a master bedroom. The things that Dr. Reeves saw, a beer bottle, some dirty clothes, didn't seem unusual. He mentions an old Time magazine. Time is the name you probably know of a famous magazine in English that has been around, I don't know how long, for several decades. A decade being, of course, 10 years. The doctor says that there are some pills on the table, and he asks Anne, what are these pills for? When you ask someone, what is this for, F-O-R, you mean, what is its purpose? Why is it here? She says to Dr. Reeves that they were for Bill's legs, or his leg, rather, because he messed up his leg playing football. To mess something up, M-E-S-S-U-P, 2 words. To mess up means here that he hurt it. But you can also use the term to mess up when you make a mistake. You can say, I messed up. I made a mistake. I did something wrong. So it can have both of those meanings. The college where Bill played football was USC, which in this story means the University of Southwestern California. Dr. Reeves can't figure out what happened to Anne's sister and Anne's brother-in-law. A brother-in-law, of course, is the person that is married to your sister, and your sister-in-law is someone who is married to your brother. The Two missing people seem to have just disappeared into thin air. The expression to disappear into thin, T-H-I-N, air, means that there's no clue as to what happened. You disappear so completely that no one knows what happened. Sometimes we use this expression when something disappears quickly. Dr. Reeves suggests to Anne that they go to the police and talk to them. But Anne doesn't want to. She says that she had gone to the police already. They told her to fill out some forms and wait. To fill out a form means to put some information on a piece of paper. Dr. Reeves then stops and looks at Anne and says to himself, "This poor kid." He doesn't mean here that she doesn't have any money. When we say this poor person, we mean this unfortunate person, when something bad has happened to them. He describes her as 22, meaning 22 years old, and in such pain. In such pain here means in a lot of pain. Then a telephone rings, and it is Anne's cell phone or mobile phone. She answers it, and her face suddenly becomes very sad. She hangs up and says to Dr. Reeves, "That was Bill. Something terrible has happened." On the next episode of Missing Person, we'll find out what terrible thing happened. Remember to visit our website, EnglishThroughStories.com. We also have 2 other podcasts you might be interested in listening to, a daily podcast called English as a Second Language Podcast, and our TOEFL podcast for those studying for the TOEFL examination or the IELTS. From Los Angeles, I'm Dr. Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you next time on English Through Stories. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 4, Meeting at the Cafe. This is Episode 4 of Missing Persons from English Through Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. In our previous episode, Dr. Reeves and his student, Anne Prado, were in the bathroom of Anne's sister, Sarah. Anne's sister, Sarah, and her brother-in-law, Bill, are missing. It turns out that the noise they heard in the bathroom was just a little cat. So they looked around the apartment, tried to find something that would tell them what happened to Bill. Dr. Reeves noticed that there were some pills on the table next to their bed in the master bedroom. Apparently, those pills, according to Anne, were for Bill's leg. Bill had hurt his leg playing football in college. Dr. Reeves tells Anne that they should go to the police, but Anne says no, the police won't help. Then, at the end, we hear a telephone call to Anne. Anne's face is very sad, and she says something terrible has happened. Now, Episode 4, Meeting at the Cafe. "We have to go, Dr. Reeves," Anne said excitedly. That was Bill on the phone. He's at a restaurant called Cafe Pico. Sarah's been kidnapped. "Kidnapped? Are you sure?" I asked, somewhat incredulously. "I'm sure. Someone has taken Sarah," Anne replied. Bill said that a man is holding her, and he would kill her if we don't give him the ransom he's demanding. Anne was pulling me to the door of the apartment. "Come on. Bill said he will explain at the restaurant." I closed the door to the apartment and followed Anne down the stairs and into my car. The weather was typical for Los Angeles. Sunny, 75 degrees, with brown smog covering the city. LA is a city of dreams, but for some people, it's a city of nightmares. Anne and I drove down Robertson Boulevard in my old red Mustang, going around cars as fast as we could without causing a pileup. "Where is this cafe again?" I asked her. "On Robertson and Pico, next to a bookstore," Anne answered. She was justifiably nervous. You could tell it in her eyes. Arriving a few minutes later, we found a place to park in front of the bookstore and walked into the cafe. Bill was there waiting for us. "Bill! Oh my God, Bill! What happened?" Anne hugged Bill, who looked tired and worried. "Oh, this is my friend, Dr. Darren Reeves," Anne said. "Dr. Reeves, this is Bill. Dr. Reeves is my professor at USC, but he's also a very good detective. When I found out that you and Sarah were missing, I went to him for help." "It's good to meet you, Bill," I said. Yeah, I'm glad to meet you too," Bill said. Bill, Anne, and I sat down at a table in front of the cafe. The waitress came to take our order. I asked for a glass of iced tea. I'm a bit of a caffeine addict, truth be told. "Bill, tell us what happened to Sarah. Is she okay?" Anne asked impatiently. "Sarah is fine for now," Bill said. "But for a while, I thought both of us would be killed. 2 days ago, a strange man knocked on our door at the apartment. I opened the door, and before I knew what was happening, he had a gun in my face and was shouting obscenities at me." "What did he look like?" I asked. "He was tall and muscular," said Bill, "but he wore a ski hat, so I couldn't see his face very well. He had a mustache, I think. It all happened so fast." "That's okay. Go on," I said. "Well, the man took Sarah and me and put us in a car. He put a small towel around our eyes, tied our legs and hands together, and then drove us to another place. We were forced out of the car and into a small, dingy room. We were given food twice a day. I'm not sure how many kidnappers there were holding us there. I heard several voices outside the door, maybe 3 or 4, I'm not sure. Finally this morning, about an hour ago, I was let go and given a message. If I wanted Sarah to be set free, I had to pay a ransom of $500,000. Our episode begins with Anne trying to get Dr. Reeves out of the apartment as soon as possible in order to meet Bill at a cafe. Bill had called Anne and told her to come to a cafe to meet her. Anne says to Dr. Reeves, "That was Bill on the phone." The expression "that was a name on the phone" means that is the person who had called or who had just called. Bill told Anne that Sarah had been kidnapped. To kidnap someone, Kidnap, means that you take the person, you don't kill them, but you ask for money in order for the person to be returned. Dr. Reeves says, "Are you sure?" somewhat incredulously. To be incredulous is to doubt what another person is saying, to think that what someone else is saying is probably not true. And the adverb, incredulously, is how he asked the question, with some doubt. Anne assured Dr. Reeves that this was true. He told her that Bill had said that a man would kill her sister Sarah if he didn't give him the ransom he's demanding. Ransom, R-A-N-S-O-M, is the word we give to the money you would give to someone who is a kidnapper, who kidnaps. The money that you pay is called the ransom. And usually we use the verb to demand. To demand means to say you must do this. It's like an order. You demand a ransom. Ransom is a noun, of course, for standing for the money. Anne says to Dr. Reeves, "Come on." That expression, "come on," in this case means hurry up, follow me, come with me. Sometimes we use that expression when we don't believe something. Someone tells us something that we don't think is true, and we say, "Oh, come on." That means that can't be true. I don't believe you. Something you would say with a family member or a friend. As they're walking outside, going to Dr. Reeves' car, Dr. Reeves says that it's a typical day in Los Angeles, sunny, 75 degrees, with brown smog covering the city. Smog is a word that comes from smoke and fog, and it generally means pollution, which is why it's brown. And this smog covers the city, meaning it's all over the city. He mentioned that L.A. is the city of dreams, and for some people, it's the city of nightmares or a bad dream. Anne and Dr. Reeves drive quickly down Robertson Avenue, which is a big street here in Los Angeles, and they try not to cause a pileup. A pileup, two words, P-I-L-E-U-P, hyphen U-P, is a bunch of cars that get into an accident. So we say there's a pileup on the freeway. We mean that 3, 4, maybe 10 cars are involved in a single accident. Dr. Reeves says that Anne looked justifiably nervous. Justifiably is another adverb. The adjective justifiable means that it makes sense, that there is a good reason for something to happen. To justify, as the verb, means to give an explanation or to give a reason. So justifiably, as an adverb, means that it makes sense, that there is good reason for her to be nervous. Dr. Reeves says that you can tell it in her eyes. This case, to tell it means you can notice it. You know that it's true. You can discover it by looking at her eyes. Dr. Reeves and Anne arrive at the cafe, and Anne introduces Dr. Reeves to Bill. And Bill says, or rather Dr. Reeves says, "It's good to meet you," which is a common expression you would use when you're first meeting someone. "It's good to meet you," or "It's nice to meet you." Bill responds by saying, "I'm glad to meet you." Again, same thing. They sit down. The waitress comes to take their order, meaning what they're going to drink or eat. And Dr. Reeves orders a glass of iced tea. And then he says, "I'm a bit of a caffeine addict, truth be told." First of all, caffeine is what comes in tea and coffee, usually. It's sort of a drug that makes you more awake, sometimes a little more nervous. A addict, A-D-D-I-C-T, is someone who literally is addicted, would be the verb. And to be addicted means that you need this drug. Like people become addicted on heroin or cocaine. Well, Dr. Reeves isn't literally or actually addicted to caffeine, but he uses that term, addict, for a person who acts as though they were addicted in this case. He uses the expression also, truth be told. It's somewhat of an older expression when you say Well, truth be told, I don't really want to go to the movie. It means to be very honest, and usually when you're being more honest than you normally are with someone. Anne asks Bill what happened to Sarah, and she asks this question impatiently. Another adverb, to be impatient, means, of course, that you can't wait, that you want to find out right away or do something right away. And impatiently, as the adverb, is how she asked this question. Well, Bill says that a strange man had come to their door, and Bill opened up the door, and before he knew what was happening, meaning before he could figure out what was going on, this man put a gun in his face, meaning he held the gun up to his face, and was shouting obscenities at him. Obscenities is a vulgar or a bad word, a swear word, something that you would not say to someone that you liked. An obscenity is something that you would say to someone that you don't like, and it's a vulgar expression. Dr. Reeves asked Bill what this man looked like, and Bill answers he was tall and muscular. To be muscular comes from the word muscle. It means someone who has a lot of muscles. I'm not particularly muscular, for example. Bill said that the man was wearing a ski hat, and you'll remember that a ski hat is a hat that covers your whole face so you can't see, used by people to keep warm when they ski. He said that he thought the man had a mustache, but it happened so fast. It all happened so fast. That expression, it all happened so fast, means something took place and you didn't really have a chance to notice or to figure out what was going on. Now, Bill explains that these kidnappers took him and Sarah and put them in a car. They tied up their legs and hands. They put a small towel around their eyes. And when you put something around your eyes like that, we call that a blindfold. All one word, blind, just like you can't see. A blindfold is when you put something over someone's eye. They then drove them to another place and put them into a small, dingy room. The adjective dingy, D-I-N-G-Y, means very dark, not very much light, not a very nice place. Finally, Bill explains that this morning the kidnappers had let him go, meaning they let him leave, and told him that if he wanted Sarah to be free, he'd have to pay a ransom of $500,000. That is episode 4 of Missing Person. On the next episode, we'll learn more about the ransom demand made by the kidnappers. Be sure to listen to our daily podcast, English as a Second Language podcast, at eslpod.com, or just go to our website for this podcast, EnglishThroughStories.com, for more information. From Los Angeles, California, I'm Dr. Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you next time on English Through Stories. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 5, No Police. This is English Through Stories, Episode 5 of Missing Person. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. For a script of this episode, please go to our website at EnglishThroughStories.com. In the previous episode, Dr. Reeves and his student Ann Partho, met with Bill. Bill is Ann's brother-in-law. We learned that Bill's wife, Sarah, who is also Ann's sister, has been kidnapped, and that the kidnappers are demanding a large ransom, $500,000. Bill said that both he and his wife were kidnapped, and that the kidnappers let him go so he can get the ransom money for his wife. Now, episode 5, No Police. When does he want the money? I asked. Tomorrow. He said he would call me this afternoon and tell me where to make the drop, Bill said. He also made it crystal clear that we were not to call the police. If I didn't hand over the money by the deadline, he said he's going to kill Sarah. Bill put his face in his hands. He turned to Ann. Geez, Ann, I don't know what to do. We'll get the money, Bill. Don't worry, Ann said. You know that my parents left Sarah and me a lot of money when they died. Ann put her hand on Bill's shoulder. Ann and Sarah's parents owned a very large computer company in Los Angeles, Partho Computers Incorporated. When they died a few years ago, Mr. and Mrs. Partho left their 2 daughters a very large pile of cash. That's how Ann got the money to go to USC and could afford her cell phone, her Mercedes, and her apartment on the beach. While Ann and Bill comforted each other, I called the young waitress over and asked for another iced tea. She wasn't very friendly, but then again, most waitresses in L.A. aren't. They all really want to be actresses. Drinking my tea and thinking about the case, the thought occurred to me that the kidnapper must know Ann and Sarah, or at least know that they had a lot of money and could get it quickly. I know this is a difficult time, Bill, I interrupted, but I need to ask you and Ann a few questions. Does your family have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt you? Ann looked at Bill, and they both began to think. The 2 of them spent the next 20 minutes coming up with a list of people who might want to harm them. They got the list down to 2 prime suspects, both of whom used to work for the Partho computer business before they were fired. They gave me the names of the 2 ex-employees. This will be a good place for me to start, I told them. Now, you 2 need to get some rest. I'll drive you both back to Bill's apartment. No, Dr. Reeves. I want to go with you, Ann insisted. I found it very hard to say no, but I had to. I needed time to be alone and to get some advice from an old friend. I'm really sorry, Ann, I apologized, but you need to rest, and I need time to look into these names you gave me. No police, Bill quickly added. Don't worry, Bill, I told him. There'll be no police involved. Not yet, anyway. The 3 of us got up and started walking toward my car. I had a funny feeling that there was more to this mystery than any of us thought. Our episode begins with Dr. Reeves, the narrator of the story, asking Bill when the kidnappers want the money. Bill says that they want it tomorrow, and they told him where to make the drop. To make the drop means where he's supposed to leave the money. The term a drop, D-R-O-P, is used by criminals and police to talk about where money or information or something is being left for someone else to pick up. Bill said that the kidnappers made it crystal clear that they were not to call the police. To make something crystal clear means to make it very clear, so there is no misunderstanding. A crystal is, of course, like a piece of glass that you can see through, and so crystal clear means very clear. Bill said that if he doesn't hand over the money by the deadline, the kidnappers are going to kill Sarah. To hand over here means to give. The expression hand over is usually one in which you are not necessarily voluntarily giving the person the money or whatever it is. So a robber, a burglar who came to you and said, hand over all your money, means give me all your money even if you don't want to. Bill then turned to Anne and said, "Geez, Anne, I don't know what to do." The expression geez, which is normally spelled G-E-E-Z, is one of those words you would say when you're confused or you're upset or maybe you're mad. For example, you might say, geez, I just missed my train this morning. Or, geez, I wish I had seen that movie last weekend. Bill is told by Anne that he shouldn't worry, that Sarah and Anne's parents had left them a lot of money when they died. Our narrator, Dr. Reeves, then explains that Anne and Sarah's parents owned a computer company in Los Angeles, and when they died, they left their two daughters a very large pile of cash. Cash, of course, is money. A large pile would mean a lot of money. A pile is a stack. When you put one thing on top of another, you can pile things up. You can have a pile of paper, which would be many papers on top of each other. When you say someone has a pile of cash, you mean they have a lot of money. Anne and Bill then comforted each other. To comfort someone is to talk to them, to be sympathetic with them, to try to help them. Dr. Reeves, meanwhile, asked the waitress for another iced tea. While he was drinking his tea, Dr. Reeves said that the thought occurred to me that the kidnapper must know Anne and Sarah. The expression, the thought occurred to me, just means he thought. But it is a little more complicated way of saying the same thing. The thought occurred to me that I should take a break. I should go on vacation. That would be the same as, I think I should go on vacation. I do actually think I should go on vacation. Dr. Reeves then asks Bill and Anne to think of any enemies they might have, people who might want to hurt them. And so Anne and Bill spend 20 minutes coming up with a list of people. To come up with something is to think about for a long time and usually write or say whatever it is that you are thinking about. For example, come up with 5 people that you really want to meet. Means think and then either tell me or write down those 5 people. You can also say, I came up with the answer, meaning I thought of the answer after thinking about it for a while. They came up with a list of people, and they got the list down to 2 prime suspects. The expression to get the list down or to get something down to means to reduce it, to make it less. I wanted to go to an Italian restaurant, and I wanted to order lasagna and pizza and raviolis, but of course I couldn't order all 3. So I got it down to 2 choices, the pizza or the ravioli. To get something down to means to reduce the number. Prime suspects is a term we would use for a criminal, someone who has done something wrong. A suspect is someone who we think might have committed a crime or done something wrong. The word prime here, P-R-I-M-E, means the first or the most likely suspect. The 2 prime suspects in this case were ex-employees or former employees, people who used to work for Pardo Computer Incorporated. These 2 people had been fired by the company. To be fired means that they took away your job. They told you to leave, that you could no longer work there. Dr. Reeves tells Bill and Ann that they need to get some rest. Notice here that rest is a noun, not a verb. You could tell someone, you need to rest, and their rest would be a verb. But it's a little more common in this case for people to say, you need to get some rest. Means you need to rest more, to get some rest. Anne wants to go with Dr. Reeves, but Dr. Reeves says no, she needs to rest, and I need time to think. Bill then adds, no police, meaning no police should be involved. And Dr. Reeves says, okay, at least not for now. At the end of the story, he says, I had a funny feeling that there was more to this mystery than any of us thought. The expression to have a funny feeling means that you suspect, you think that there is something wrong. I have a funny feeling that my neighbor is taking some of my roses at night. I suspect, I don't know, but that's what I'm thinking. The expression, there's more to this than any of us thought, means that there is more involved, that there's something else going on here that we don't know about. In our next episode, we'll meet a friend of Dr. Reeves who will try to help him to solve or to find the answer to this crime. If you enjoy English Through Stories, check out our other podcasts. English as a Second Language podcast is a daily podcast that you can subscribe to. We also have the TOEFL podcast for those who are studying for the test of English as a foreign language or IELTS or other similar exams. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you next time on English Through Stories. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 6, Kathy Again. This is episode 6 of Missing Person. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. First, let's recap or review episode 5. In the last episode, we learned that the kidnappers of Anne's sister, Sarah, had demanded that they bring a large ransom or amount of money, but not to call the police. We also learn that Anne and Sarah, who are sisters, are daughters of a couple that owned a large computer company and who had since died and left them with a lot of money. It occurred to our narrator, Dr. Reeves, that the kidnappers must know Anne and Sarah because they know that they could get a lot of money very quickly. So Dr. Reeves asks Anne and Sarah's husband, Bill, to make a list of possible suspects, that is, people who might have committed this crime. And they give him the names of 2 ex-employees or former employees of their parents' computer company. Then, at the end, we find out that Dr. Reeves has his suspicions. He thinks something might be wrong here. And now episode 6, Kathy again. I drove Bill and Anne back to Sarah and Bill's apartment building to drop them both off there. Anne had left her car there so she could drive herself home. I told them to call me if anything new came up. "Thanks for your help today, Dr. Reeves," Anne said. "I know you'll help us find my sister." She gave me a big, long hug. I didn't linger there with Anne as much as I wanted to reassure her that things would work out. I needed to talk to an old friend, Kathy Chang, about what happened today. We were supposed to have dinner at 5:30 at her apartment, and it was already 5:20. Kathy hates it when I'm late. I drove to Kathy's apartment, and I snagged a parking spot in front of her building. It was 5:45, and I was late. I knocked on the door, and Kathy let me in. "You're late, Darren, as usual," Kathy said. I knew I was late, but Kathy and I have known each other for many years. I didn't want to hear about all of the other times I was late, so I changed the subject. "I'm glad to see you too, Kathy. What are we having for dinner?" "Dinner? You come late and now you want dinner?" she replied. "How much are you willing to pay me?" She had one of her inviting smiles on her face. "All I have is yours," I said jokingly. I think I broke the ice with that one. Kathy and I stopped dating over a year ago, but she still likes to pretend that we're going out. I meet her every week for dinner, and I play along with the joke. Deep down, though, I think she's still in love with me. I have to admit I have feelings for her as well, but life keeps interfering. Okay, time for dinner. Let's dig in. Kathy quickly brushed her long black hair from her face, got up, and went into the kitchen. Kathy was a reporter for Los Angeles' biggest television station. She was both very smart and very beautiful. I met her at a conference in Hawaii about 6 years ago. She was now my best friend in Los Angeles. One more thing about Kathy. She is a great cook. "Let's eat, big guy," she said. And so we did. Our episode begins with Dr. Reeves dropping Anne and Bill off at Sarah and Bill's apartment. Remember that Bill is Sarah's husband and Sarah is still missing. Anne is her sister. To drop someone off means usually to drive them and then leave them somewhere. You can drop a person off. You can also drop a thing or an object off. I have to drop off my glasses to be fixed, means I have to leave them somewhere. Dr. Reeves tells Anne and Bill that if anything comes up, they should call him. When we talk about something coming up, we mean if anything happens. It could be a positive thing. It could be a negative thing. Sometimes you might say, I'm sorry I was late. I couldn't be here on time. Something came up, meaning something happened that prevented me from doing what I wanted to do. Dr. Reeves is then given a big, long hug by Anne. A hug, H-U-G, is when you put your arms around someone, usually a friend, though it could be someone your wife or your husband or your girlfriend, and you pull their body next to yours. It also, you could say, embrace means the same thing. Dr. Reeves says that he didn't linger with Anne as much as he wanted to reassure her that things would work out. To linger means to stay somewhere for a long time. Often you're waiting for something to happen. To reassure here means that someone has doubts or someone is perhaps afraid or scared, and you want to make them believe that everything is going to be okay. So to reassure here means Dr. Reeves is trying to tell Anne that everything is going to be okay. Another way of saying that everything is going to be okay is that things would work out. When we talk about things working out, we mean that they're going to be okay, that they're going to have a positive result. The opposite, of course, things didn't work out, means that you had a negative result. You can say, for example, I hired a new employee, but she was very lazy, so I had to fire or get rid of her. Things didn't work out with that employee. To work out also has another meaning as a verb, which is to exercise. So I'm going to the gym today to work out, or next week I will definitely work out. Dr. Reeves goes to see an old friend of his, Kathy Chang. The two of them were supposed to have dinner at 5:30. When we say you're supposed to have, we mean that you were planning on it or it was scheduled. Dr. Reeves drives over to Kathy's apartment and snags a parking spot in front of her building. To snag a parking spot means to find or to get a parking spot. And a parking spot is a place for your car. It's a parking place, means the same thing. Dr. Reeves knocks on the door and Kathy lets him in. To let someone in means to open a door and allow them to come in. Kathy is mad at Dr. Reeves, so Dr. Reeves decides to change the subject. To change the subject means to start talking about something else. If you're having an argument with your wife or your husband, they may say, and you don't want to talk about it anymore, they may say, don't change the subject. You know what we're talking about. So to change the subject means to talk about something different. So Dr. Reeves, whose first name we find out is Darren decides to change the subject and ask what they are going to eat for dinner. What are we having for dinner means what are we eating for dinner. And Kathy is upset and says, you want dinner? And then she says, how much are you willing to pay me? An inviting smile on her face, meaning she's not serious. And when we say something is inviting, we mean that it is tempting, that it is something that you would want to have. It's clear here that Kathy is flirting with Darren. To flirt, F-L-I-R-T, means that you say things or you do things to make the other person think that you are romantically interested in them. Well, then we hear Darren, or Dr. Reeves, explain that he and Kathy had stopped dating over a year ago, and to date means to go with someone, to be with someone, to be romantically involved, we would say, with someone. It's before you are married, though, so dating is before you are married. That doesn't mean necessarily that it's a sexual relationship, although it could be as well. Another word for dating is going out. I and my girlfriend are going out means we are dating. We are seeing each other. That's another expression. Are you seeing anyone? Meaning, are you dating anyone? Are you going out with anyone? Darren says that deep down, he thinks Kathy is still in love with him. The expression deep down means that if you think about it very hard, or you have a certain reaction, instinct, that tells you that something is true or something is false. So deep down, I really love to eat chocolate, even though I may say I don't like to. It's sort of telling a very private or secret truth. Darren says that he has feelings for Kathy as well. To have feelings for someone means that you're interested in them romantically, but perhaps not as much as the other person is. Kathy then says it's time for dinner. Let's dig in. To dig in, D-I-G-I-N, 2 words, means here simply let's eat, let's start. We then hear Darren explaining how Kathy is a reporter, and at the end of the description, he says, one more thing about Kathy. One more thing here means I have one more thing I want to tell you about Kathy, and it is that she's a great cook. Let's eat, big guy, she says, and so they did. The expression big guy here is something you would say to a man, a woman would say to a man, that she's saying you're a big, strong man, that sort of thing. That concludes this episode of Missing Person. Be sure to come back next week for episode 7. Remember, you can read the entire script of our story on our website, www.englishthroughstories.com. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you next time. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 7, An Accident? This is Episode 7 of Missing Person. I'm your host, Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. On a previous episode, we learned that Dr. Reeves had dropped off or had left Bill and Sarah at their apartment building. He went to see his old friend, Kathy. He went to her apartment building, parked in front of her building, went up to her door, and he was late. And Kathy was not very happy, but eventually let him in, meaning allowed him to come into her apartment, where she had made dinner for them. We also found out that Kathy and Dr. Reeves, or Darren as he is called by Kathy, because she was his former girlfriend. And Dr. Reeves thinks that Kathy is still in love with him. Kathy works for a television station and is a reporter. At the end of the episode, Kathy said, "Let's eat." They were just about to sit down and eat their dinner. That brings us to episode 7, An Accident. Kathy came back in the room with tonight's dinner, Italian pasta with chicken. As we ate, I told Kathy about Anne and her missing sister. A strange man came to Sarah and Bill Salas's apartment building 2 days ago, forced them both into a car, and took them away, I explained. Today, the man let Bill go and told him to get $500,000 or he would kill Sarah. And how did you get mixed up in all this? Kathy asked. Sarah's sister Anne is my student at USC. She asked me to lend a hand, and I said yes. So who do you think the kidnappers could be? She asked. Well, Bill and Anne gave me the names of 2 ex-employees of Pardo Computers. I'm going to see one of them tonight. Where does this person work? Kathy asked. He now works at a strip club near the airport. He's not the person who took Sarah, Kathy said confidently. Why do you say that? I haven't even talked to him yet, I said, surprised. Trust me, the man you want is smart, very smart. Smart men don't work at strip clubs. Kathy was probably right. I thanked her for the wonderful dinner and told her I would call her tomorrow if I found out anything. Even though I trust Kathy's judgment, I decided to go visit this former employee anyway, just to be sure he wasn't the one who took Sarah. I drove my car down La Brea. Suddenly I heard an emergency announcement on the police scanner in my car. The radio picks up all of the police communication in the city. I had it put into my car so I could hear any important police action related to my cases. I immediately pulled over and cranked up the volume. There was an accident on the freeway involving a black Mercedes. The woman in the car was hurt. I listened closely to the name as the radio operator gave the details. Young, Latina female, age 22, name, Anne Pardo. Our episode begins with Darren, or Dr. Reeves, telling Kathy the story of what happened to Sarah and Bill Salas. Sarah and Bill, he says, were forced into a car by a strange man who took them away. The expression to force them into a car means that you make someone do something, usually with perhaps some sort of violence. So to force means to make someone or something do something that it doesn't want to or wouldn't normally do. The man took them away, meaning he transported them somewhere else, and he let Bill go, meaning he let Bill leave, and told him to get $500,000. Kathy asks how Dr. Reeves got mixed up in all this. When we say I'm mixed up in something, means it's a problem or there's some sort of complication and I am somehow involved. So Kathy is asking, how did you get involved in this problem? And Dr. Reeves explains that Sarah's sister Anne is his student, and she had asked him to lend her a hand. To lend someone a hand means to help them, to give them some assistance. Here, let me lend you a hand means let me help you. Dr. Reeves explains that he is going to see 2 ex-employees of Pardo Computers who may be possible suspects or people who may have kidnapped Sarah. When we say we're going to see someone, we mean, of course, we're going to visit or meet with them. Kathy asks where this person works, or one of these ex-employees works, and Dr. Reeves says he works at a strip club. A strip, S-T-R-I-P club, is a bar usually, or a club where women, usually women, take their clothes off. And this is permitted in many American cities, most American cities, big cities, have these are for adults, for men. And that's where this particular person works. Kathy says that he isn't the person who took Sarah. And Dr. Reeves asks why, and she says, "Trust me." The expression "trust me" means believe me, I know the truth. And she says that the person who took Sarah is smart, and if you were smart, a man, you wouldn't be working in a strip club. Then Darren says, or Dr. Reeves says, that he has to go, and says that he will call Kathy tomorrow if he found out anything. To find out means, of course, to discover anything. He then says that he trusts Kathy's judgment. When someone says, "I trust your judgment," they mean, I believe that your opinion is correct. And even though I don't know, I believe you, I trust you. So their judgment here is their opinion about something. Dr. Reeves then says he drove his car down La Brea. To drive your car down the street means to drive your car on the street. But we don't say, "I drove my car on the street." We'd probably say we drove it down the street. In this case, he went down one of the big streets here in Los Angeles called La Brea. Suddenly, he hears an announcement on the police scanner. A scanner, S-C-A-N-N-E-R, is a radio that can pick up or that can receive signals from police or fire or emergency vehicles. And he has this police scanner in his car, which in many cities is illegal in the United States. But if you have a police scanner, you can hear all of the communication between the police officers. He says he immediately pulled over, and to pull over your car means to stop your car and to park it on the side of the road. And he cranked up the volume. To crank, C-R-A-N-K, or to crank up, means to increase, to turn up the volume. It's an informal expression. Somebody might say, "Crank it up," means turn the volume up. The accident that Dr. Reeves is listening to on his police scanner, or about which he is listening on his police scanner, involves a black Mercedes. When we say an accident involving a black Mercedes, we mean that has one of the vehicles, one of the cars is a black Mercedes. The woman in the car is hurt, and Dr. Reeves listens to the description of the woman. She's a young Latina female. Latina, capital L-A-T-I-N-A, or Latino, is a person who is from Mexico, Central America, or one of the many Spanish-speaking countries, for the most part, in South America. It could also be someone from Puerto Rico or other areas where Spanish is spoken. And that's an expression, a term that we use to describe someone of that ethnic background. The other word we also use sometimes is Hispanic. And Hispanic and Latino for a boy, a man, Latina for a woman, those mean the same thing. The woman involved in the accident is Ann Pardo. And Anne is, you'll remember, Sarah's sister, the one who went to Dr. Reeves and asked him for his help. That's all we have time for today on this episode of Missing Person. Come back again next week when you'll hear episode 8. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. Thanks for listening. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. This is English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 8, Tracing the Plates. You're listening to Missing Person, Episode 8. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. In the previous episode, Dr. Reeves, our narrator, was at the apartment of his friend and ex-girlfriend, Kathy. He explained the case of the missing woman, Sarah Pardo, and told Kathy that he had 2 suspects, 2 ex-employees of the company that Sarah Pardo and Ann Pardo's parents used to own. So he decided to go and talk to one of the ex-employees at a bar at a club near the airport. As he was driving to the airport, however, he heard on his police scanner, his police radio, a message about an accident on the freeway involving Ann Pardo. We now pick up our story, or continue the story, with Episode 8, Tracing the Plates. Be careful. She might have broken bones, the ambulance driver yelled. I arrived at the accident scene just a few minutes after the police. Anne was already in the ambulance and ready to go to the hospital. Wait just 1 second, I said to the police officer, closing the back door of the ambulance. I'm a friend of the victim. Can I talk to her? Okay, go ahead, she said, but hurry up. Thanks. I turned and looked at Anne. She had hurt her arm and leg, but she was awake and able to speak. Anne, I said softly. Anne, it's me, Dr. Reeves. Anne opened her eyes slowly. Dr. Reeves, what are you doing here? I heard about the accident on my police scanner. Anne, what happened? A car, red car, going very fast, hit me from behind, tried to kill me. It was difficult for her to talk. A red car, Anne? I asked, hoping to get more information. Did you see the driver? No, didn't see, but I got the license plate. 3XCW 451, she said, running out of breath. Anne, that's wonderful. Good work. Thanks, Dr. Reeves. She smiled a little and touched my hand softly. Okay, buddy, you have to go now, the policewoman yelled. She needs to get to the hospital. I jumped out of the ambulance and it drove away. I got back in my car and drove to the nearest payphone. I had to find out who owned the car. Hello, police department? Yes. Get me Officer Cho. Cho was an old friend of mine. When I needed a favor, he was always willing to help. Cho, this is Darren Reeves. Yeah, look, I need some information on a car registration. License number 3XZW451. Right. I'll call you back in an hour. Thanks, Cho. You're the best. It was now 7:45 p.m., and I still needed to talk to one of the ex-employees of Pardo Computers, who worked at a club near the airport. I drove down the freeway and arrived about 20 minutes later. When I got to the club, I walked inside. The bar smelled of old beer, old cigarettes, and old men. I sat down at the bar and ordered a drink. I was here to speak to Lenny McKay, an ex-employee of Pardo Computers. "Excuse me, bartender," I said to the man serving the drinks. "I'm looking for Lenny McKay." "Never heard of Lenny McKay," he answered very quickly. "You got the wrong place. There ain't no Lenny McKay working here." I looked into his eyes, and I knew he was lying. I got up from the bar and walked to the back of the place. There was a door to the left. The door had a sign on it that said, "Do not enter." I entered. "Hey," a man yelled at me as I went into the back room. "Who are you?" "I'm looking for Lenny McKay." "Are you Lenny?" "Yeah, I'm Lenny." "Now, who are you?" he replied. "My name's Reeves. Look, I'm not here to waste your time. I just want to ask you a few questions. Now, where were you 2 days ago, at about 8:30 in the morning?" "I was in Las Vegas with my girlfriend." "Ask her. She'll tell you that I was with her." I believed Lenny when he told me he was in Vegas, but I needed to be sure. "Who's your girlfriend? What's her name?" I asked. "Her name is Tanya. She's working here tonight. You can ask her." I walked over to the table and found a girl sitting by herself, drinking a beer. "Are you Tanya?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm Tanya. What do you want, bud?" "I just have a quick question for you. Where were you 2 days ago?" "Who wants to know?" "I'm investigating a girl who's gone missing, and I just want to clear someone of suspicion, that's all." "I was in Las Vegas with my boyfriend, Lenny McKay." "That's all I needed to know. Thanks." I walked out of the bar and got back into my car. As usual, Kathy was right. Lenny wasn't involved in the kidnapping. I got back on the freeway and drove to my apartment. It was now 10:30 p.m., and I was tired. I needed to sleep before I could continue my investigation. As soon as I got into my apartment, I checked my voicemail for messages. There was only one. It was from a man with a very deep voice. The message was short but very clear. "Darren Reeves, stop trying to find Sarah Salas. If you don't stop looking for her now, you will die." The title of our episode 8 is Tracing the Plates. The plates here refers to the license plates on a car. To trace the plates, T-R-A-C-E, means to talk to the police and find out who the license plates or the car belongs to. As Dr. Reeves arrives at the scene of the accident on the freeway, the ambulance driver says, "Be careful, she may have broken bones." The ambulance is the truck that takes people who are sick and need to get to the hospital right away. It transports them. It takes them there. In the United States, most cities have a ambulance system. Usually the ambulances have what are called paramedics. And a paramedic is not a doctor, but someone who is trained, who knows something about helping people who are sick, at least until they get to the hospital. Dr. Reeves asks the police officer if he can talk to the woman. He says, "I'm a friend of the victim." A victim, V-I-C-T-I-M, is someone who has had something bad happen to them, such as a crime. You can also be a victim of a natural disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake. The police officer said, "Go ahead, but hurry up." To hurry up means, of course, to go quickly. Dr. Reeves says to Anne, "Anne, it's me." And he says this softly. To say something softly is to lower your voice and not speak loudly. Dr. Reeves asks Anne what happened, and Anne tells him that a red car going very fast hit her from behind, meaning hit the back of the car, and tried to kill her. Anne was lucky enough to get the license plate number and gives the license plate number to Dr. Reeves. The policewoman then tells Dr. Reeves that he has to go. She says, "Okay, buddy, you have to go now." Buddy, B-U-D-D-Y, is just another word for guy or man. Technically, buddy is a friend of yours, but people also use it to mean something like guy. Like, "Hey, buddy." It usually has some sort of slightly negative connotation, slightly negative meaning when it's used like that. Dr. Reeves says that he jumped out of the ambulance and it drove away. To jump out of the ambulance means to get out of the ambulance quickly. He then calls from a payphone. A payphone is not very common anymore. It's where you can go and make a public telephone call. There are still payphones in the United States, but because everyone now has cell phones, they're not as popular. He calls the police department and says to the operator, "Get me Officer Cho," meaning I want to talk to Officer Cho. Get him on the line, he might say. Get him on the telephone. I want to speak with him. Officer Cho is what you would call a police officer. A police officer would be called officer. Officer McQuillan would be a police officer named McQuillan. I'm not a police officer, of course. Dr. Reeves says that he needs some car registration information. The car registration is who the car is registered. In every state in the United States, you have to register a car that you own. And so there is a record, there's a file of your name somewhere, and every car has a license plate. Dr. Reeves tells Officer Cho that he'll call him back in an hour. He says at the end of his conversation, "You're the best," meaning you're great. You are the best at what you do. Dr. Reeves then goes to the club by the airport. He goes into the bar and he asks the bartender, and the bartender is the person who works at a bar, all one word, bartender. He asks the bartender if he knows Lenny McKay, and the bartender says, "I've never heard of him." There ain't no Lenny McKay working here. That expression, "there ain't any" or "there ain't no," is an informal expression. It means the same as "there isn't any," but it's very informal. Well, Dr. Reeves doesn't believe the bartender, so he goes to a door that says "Do not enter," and he opens the door. "Do not enter" means, of course, do not go or do not open this door. Do not go through by opening this door. But he does, and he finds Lenny McKay, and he asks Lenny McKay where he was 2 days ago at 8:30 in the morning, and he says that he was in Las Vegas with his girlfriend. Las Vegas, of course, is the place where people go to gamble. And Dr. Reeves says, "I believed Lenny when he told me he was in Vegas." Sometimes we call Las Vegas simply Vegas. I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to Las Vegas. Same thing. Well, Dr. Reeves decides to check his story by talking to Lenny's girlfriend, Tanya. Tanya responds, "What do you want, bud?" B-U-D, bud here, is the same as buddy. It comes from buddy. And it's not a very polite thing to say. It has a somewhat negative meaning. Dr. Reeves asks where she was 2 days ago, and she says, "Who wants to know?" And that's, again, a very challenging thing that you would say to someone when you don't want to tell them who you are, or you want to find out why they are asking. Well, Dr. Reeves explains that he's investigating a girl who has gone missing. To go missing means, of course, that you are missing, that you cannot be found. He says he wants to clear someone of suspicion. Suspicion is when you think that someone is guilty, someone did something wrong. To clear someone from suspicion means that you are providing evidence that they didn't do anything wrong. Well, Tanya says that she was in Vegas with her boyfriend, and Dr. Reeves thanks her and then decides to drive home. When he gets home, he checks his voicemail. Voicemail, of course, is where you can leave a message on a telephone. And there's one message from a man who tells him to stop trying to find Sarah Salas, and if he doesn't, he will die. That's all for episode 8 of Missing Person. Come back again and listen to our next episode on English Through Stories. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. This is English Through Stories. Missing Person, Episode 9, At the Beach. This is Episode 9 of Missing Persons on English Through Stories. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. In the previous episode, we learned that Anne, the sister of the kidnapped woman, was in a car accident. But fortunately, Dr. Reeves, our narrator, was able to talk to her and get from her the license plate number of the car. The license plate is, of course, the number that each car has, usually numbers and letters in the United States. He then went to talk to the police. He actually called one of his friends, Officer Cho, on the Los Angeles Police Department and asked him to find out who this car belonged to. In the meantime, he decided that he would take a trip and visit one of the suspects of the crime, an ex-employee of Pardo Computers. And he went to talk to Lenny McKay, to find out where he had been during the time of the kidnapping. Lenny didn't really want to speak with him, but finally told him that he was in Las Vegas with his girlfriend. Dr. Reeves then talked to the girlfriend, and the girlfriend said, yes, he was with me. He then goes back to his apartment building late at night, and he finds a message on his voicemail, on his answering machine. And it says, "Darren Reeves, stop trying to find Sarah Salas. If you don't stop looking for her now, you will die." That leads us to Episode 9, At the Beach. So now someone wanted to kill me. But how did anyone know I was working on this case? Was Lenny part of this kidnapping in some way? I still had more questions than I had answers about this case. I called my friend Officer Cho back at the police station. He had the car registration information I requested earlier. The mysterious red car that hit Anne last night on the freeway belonged to John Costello, age 37, living in Santa Monica. Tomorrow I would visit Costello. Tonight I just needed to get some sleep. The next morning I got up early and went to visit Anne in the hospital. Luckily, she was doing just fine. I told her I would pick her up later in the afternoon and give her a ride home. First, I went to visit June Brown, the other ex-employee of Pardo Computers that Anne and Bill thought might be involved in the kidnapping. She now worked at a clothing store on the beach, Stearns Fashions. I love going to the beach in L.A. The sun is always shining, the surfers are riding the waves, and the people all look so beautiful, just like movie stars. I walked into the clothing store and looked around. The customers were mostly college students. "Excuse me," I said to the young sales clerk. "I'm looking for one of the employees here, a June Brown." "Who's looking for her?" she asked, a little suspicious. "My name is Darren Reeves. I just want to ask her a few questions." "What kind of questions do you want to ask her?" she replied. "Just some questions. Look, is June Brown here today or not?" I was getting impatient with this girl. "I'm June Brown, and I don't know if I want to answer your questions, mister." She crossed her arms and looked at me with a very unfriendly face. "Who do you work for? The police?" "No, I don't work for the police. I'm a private detective," I answered. "I just want to know where you were 3 days ago in the morning." "Can you just tell me that?" "I don't remember. I think I was with my boyfriend," she said with a smile. "Yeah, that's right. I was with my boyfriend." "Can I talk to your boyfriend?" "No, you can't," she said, suddenly getting very angry. "Why not?" I asked. "Because he doesn't want to talk to you," June said. "Look, buddy, I don't have to answer your questions. Now why don't you just get out of my store?" She turned around and walked away. I couldn't force her to talk to me, so I didn't try. I left the store and got back in my car. Maybe this girl was involved in the kidnapping. Maybe she and her boyfriend were trying to get even with Pardo Computers. Maybe. Our story begins with Dr. Reeves asking who might have called him and left him that threatening message. He asks, was Lenny part of this kidnapping in some way? Meaning, was Lenny somehow connected with the kidnapping? He said he had more questions than answers, and that, of course, is a common construction in English, more something than something else. He calls Officer Cho and finds out that the car, the red car that hit Anne, that is, that crashed into Anne's car, belonged to John Costello. Belonged to means, of course, was owned by, or the owner was John Costello. He then goes and visits Anne in the hospital, and he tells her that he will pick her up later in the afternoon and give her a ride home. To pick someone up here means to drive them somewhere, to go to their house or where they are, in this case the hospital, and to drive them. He is going to give her a ride home. To give someone a ride means to take them in your car. He decides to visit the other ex-employee of Pardo Computers. Remember, he visited Lenny McKay, who was an ex-employee of Pardo Computers, which is the company that Anne and Sarah's parents owned. This employee's name is June Brown, and she works at the beach in Los Angeles, probably Venice Beach. And Dr. Reeves describes that the sun is always shining and the surfers are riding the waves. A surfer, S-U-R-F-E-R-S, is someone who goes on top of a long board, a surfboard, and tries to literally to ride on the waves. The waves, of course, are waves of water, and they actually stay on top of the water with the boards. That's, of course, surfing. And there are lots of surfers here in Los Angeles. When Dr. Reeves goes into the clothing store, he asks the sales clerk, the woman who works there, he says, "Excuse me, miss, if you are an adult and you're talking to, usually if you're talking to a younger woman, you say miss, although you can actually say miss for a woman of any age if you're trying to get her attention at a store or in a restaurant. Excuse me, miss, you could say." And the woman is asked by Dr. Reeves. He says he's looking for one of the employees, a June Brown. Notice the use of the indefinite article a June Brown. He could just say, "I'm looking for one of the employees here, June Brown." But you'll often hear someone put an A in front of that name when they're asking about someone, particularly if they are looking for someone. So you could go into a restaurant and say, "I'm looking for a Mr. Smith," meaning I'm looking for Mr. Smith. The woman doesn't want to ask or answer his question, and so finally Dr. Reeves says, "Look, is June Brown here today or not?" That expression, or that word look, is when you're getting angry or impatient and you want the person to listen to you carefully. And he asks if this woman is here today or not. That is it yes or no? Sometimes we would say informally in this situation, "Is she here or what?" And that means the same as or not, but it's more informal. Well, the woman answers that she is June Brown, and she doesn't know if she wants to answer his questions. And she uses the expression or word Mr. Mr. can refer, of course, to any man, usually an adult male, but in this particular use, it sort of has a negative meaning. It, again, expresses a certain impatience or dislike. "Now look here, mister, I don't want you here." It's not a positive use of the word. The woman then crosses her arms, meaning she puts one arm in front of, or links her two arms together in front of her, and asks who this person is, who Dr. Reeves is. Dr. Reeves says he's a private detective, which is, of course, someone who looks for or helps somebody solve a crime or do other things that the police would normally do. And the woman says that she was with her boyfriend on the morning of the kidnapping, and the Dr. Reeves says, "Can I talk to your boyfriend?" And she says no, because he doesn't want to talk to you. She says, "Look, buddy, I don't have to answer your questions." Buddy, B-U-D-D-Y, or simply Bud, B-U-D, is another word for guy, or can here mean the same as Mr. And again, it has a negative meaning to it. It's something you would probably say to someone that you're angry with or didn't like. She tells Dr. Reeves to just get out of her store, meaning to leave her store, to get out of. Dr. Reeves is still puzzled. He leaves the store. He doesn't know if the girl was involved. He thinks maybe she and her boyfriend were trying to get even with Pardo Computers. To get even, E-V-E-N, means when someone does something wrong to you, you try to do something wrong to them. It's a type of revenge when you try to get back at or hurt someone who has hurt you. But of course, Dr. Reeves doesn't really know the truth. He ends by saying maybe, maybe, maybe. That's all we have time for on today's Missing Person episode. Come back next time and find out what happens to Dr. Reeves and the missing person. Remember, next week there'll be no podcast, but we will continue again the first week of January. Happy holidays. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 10, The Bartender Shows Up. Welcome to Episode 10 of Missing Person. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, from the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This week's episode is entitled, The Bartender Shows Up. But before we get to that, let's review a little about what happened in the previous episode. In Episode 9, called At the Beach, we found that the person who had hit Ann Pardo's car, remember Ann, it's Ann's sister, Sarah, who has been kidnapped, and Ann and her brother-in-law, Bill, are trying to get her free. Our narrator, Dr. Reeves, is helping Ann find her sister. Well, Ann was in a car accident, and she was able to identify the car, and now our private detective, our university professor turned private detective, who becomes a private detective, is going to go looking for this man who owns the red car that hit Ann. He finds out his name is John Costello. Well, before he does that, he goes to talk with another former employee of Pardo Computers. Pardo Computers is the company that Ann and Sarah's parents owned before they died. And unfortunately, he's not able to get any information from the woman whose name is June Brown, the ex-employee of Pardo Computers. He goes down to the beach to talk to her where she works, and she doesn't want to tell him anything. So he's very frustrated. He's very confused. In the current episode, we are going to see Dr. Reeves try to find the man who hit Ann Pardo, John Costello. Let's get started then with Episode 10, The Bartender Shows Up. It was time to try a different approach. I decided to find John Costello first and talk to him. I wanted to find out why his car hit Ann's and almost killed her. I knew Costello lived in Santa Monica, so I drove up the freeway and got off near Main Street. I went to the address Officer Cho gave me and knocked on the door. No one answered. I knocked on the apartment manager's door. An old woman answered. "Excuse me, I'm trying to find John Costello. He lives in number 503. Mr. Costello lived, past tense, in 503. He moved out 2 months ago, she said. Do you know where he lives now or where he works? I asked. I don't know where he moved to, but I think he still works at the bar on 4th Street. Thanks for your help. I got back in my car and drove down to the bar. It was only 10 o'clock a.m., and already there were cars parked outside the place. Some people like to start drinking really early. As I walked down the street toward the bar, I heard 2 gunshots. I immediately reached for my gun, which I keep on my belt. The gun is registered, of course, but I only carry it with me when I think there might be trouble. I ran toward the bar, and I heard another sound, like the wheels of a car turning very fast. I slowly opened the front door of the bar and looked around. There was a man standing over a dead body. The floor was covered with blood. Don't shoot, the man yelled at me. It's okay. I'm a private detective. What happened here? I asked. Someone just ran in here and shot John. I think he's dead, the man answered. John? The dead man's name is John? I asked. Yeah, he was, the bartender. His name's John Costello. Someone called the police, I said. Did anyone recognize the man who shot Costello? Did anyone see what he looked like? There were 4 men at the bar. Each man looked at the other. Everyone just shook their head. I really didn't see him very well, said one man. Yeah, it's dark in here. I didn't see his face, said another. I decided not to stay at the bar. I didn't want the police to find out about Sarah's kidnapping and how Costello may have been connected. I drove back toward downtown. I stopped to have lunch at my favorite sushi bar and thought about the case. I was now more confused than ever. This morning, I guessed that John Costello might be the kidnapper. Now Costello was dead. The girl at the beach store might be involved, but I had no evidence of that. I was stuck. At around 2 p.m., I went to the hospital and picked up Anne. She was feeling much better and was happy to see me. Have you heard anything up from Bill about giving the money to the kidnappers? I asked her. No, Bill hasn't called. Well, let's get over there and see what happened. We drove over to Bill and Sarah's apartment, and we were surprised to see 2 police cars outside the building. Bill was sitting on the steps of the building crying. What happened? Anne said to me as we parked the car. Why are the police here? I don't know, Anne, I said. Let's just try to stay calm and find out what is going on. As we walked toward the apartment building, I had a feeling in my stomach that something was wrong. Very wrong. Oh, Anne, she's dead. She's dead, Bill cried. He jumped up to hug Anne. Sarah's dead. Bill, what happened? I asked. Did the kidnappers call? I saw that Anne was in shock. She couldn't believe what Bill was telling her. No, I made a horrible mistake, Bill said. I got scared, so I called the police this morning. I told them everything. I told them that Sarah had been kidnapped. Then 2 hours later, she was dead. I found Sarah's body in the street in front of the apartment building. Bill began to cry again, and Anne looked like she was going to fall down. I grabbed her arm and helped her sit down on the steps. I turned to the police officer standing next to us. Where was the body found? I asked. In the street, like Mr. Salas said, he answered. We got here about 30 minutes ago. She was already dead. She had been cut in the throat by some type of knife or piece of glass. It was over. I had tried my best, but Sarah was now dead. I thought about all the things that had happened. I even blamed myself. Maybe I should have, but you can't blame yourself. Sometimes you just have bad luck. There was nothing more I could do. I shook hands with Bill and gave Anne one last hug. I decided I would call my friend Officer Cho and tell him what I knew. Maybe they could find the person who killed Sarah. As I was about to leave, I noticed a list of names on the mailboxes of Bill and Sarah's apartment building. I don't know why I decided to look at the list. Sometimes you just do the right thing at the right time and get lucky. This was one of those times. I recognized one of the names on the list. I couldn't believe my eyes, so I looked more closely a second time. Yes, I was right. The name on the list read Costello, John, Apartment 1A. John Costello lived in the same building as Bill and Sarah Salas. Episode 10 of Missing Person begins with our narrator, Dr. Reeves, deciding he's going to find John Costello, the man who hit Ann Pardo's car and put her in the hospital. He decides to go down to Santa Monica, where he has an address for John Costello as living, and he knocks on the door of the apartment. No one answers. No one comes to the door. So he goes to the manager, the person who takes care of the apartment building, and he says he's trying to find this John Costello and that he lives in number 503. When he says he lives in, meaning he lives in the apartment building, or rather the apartment with the number 503. Well, the apartment manager tells Dr. Reeves that John Costello lived past tense in 503. She says past tense, the verb, of course, in the past tense, meaning he no longer lives there. He moved out 2 months ago, she says. To move out is the same as to move, means to go to a different place, to move to a different place. Well, the apartment manager doesn't know where he moved to, but she does know where he works, which is at a bar in Santa Monica on 4th Street. And so our narrator, Dr. Reeves, decides to go and find John Costello at his work. As he's walking up to the bar, he hears 2 gunshots. A gunshot, 2 words, gun, G-U-N, of course, and shots, S-H-O-T-S, is when a gun is fired, when a bullet is fired from a gun. That's a gunshot. And the gun is registered, according to Dr. Reeves, meaning the police know that he has the gun. In the United States, in most states where you're allowed to carry a gun, and not all states allow you to carry a gun, you usually have to tell the police, you have to fill out a form and be approved to carry a gun. Well, in this case, his gun is approved, and so he goes into the bar, and he pulls his gun out, and he sees that there is a dead body on the floor of the bar. The floor, he says, was covered with blood, meaning there was so much blood on it that it covered the whole floor. "Don't shoot," the man yells at him. This is what you would say when someone has a gun. Don't shoot, mean don't shoot me. He says, Dr. Reeves says it's okay, and the man in the bar says someone just shot John, and it turns out, we find out it is John Costello, the man that Dr. Reeves was looking for. He asks if anyone knew what happened, and he says everyone just shook their head. To shake your head, shook is the past tense. Shook is S-H-O-O-K. To shake your head, or when we say they shook their head, we mean that they said no, that they moved their head from side to side, right to left, indicating that they didn't know what happened. Well, Dr. Reeves decides to leave before the police arrive, and he goes to his favorite sushi bar to think about the case. A sushi bar is a place where they serve Japanese raw fish, which is called sushi. And the sushi bar is a place where the sushi chefs stand behind and you sit right in front of the chef, and they give you the food you want. It's a type of restaurant. It doesn't mean they serve alcohol, although they might serve alcohol in a sushi bar. In any case, our narrator, Dr. Reeves, is confused. He says he doesn't know what happened. The girl in the beach where who he talked to last time might be part of this, but he was stuck. To say I am stuck, S-T-U-C-K, can mean two things. It can mean I can't move. For example, I'm in a car accident and my door won't open. I'm stuck in the car. But here, I am stuck means I'm confused. I don't know what to do next. Well, he decides to go and pick up Anne from the hospital, and Anne and Dr. Reeves drive over to Bill and Sarah's apartment. And there are police cars outside of the apartment. Of course, both Dr. Reeves and Anne are worried. Dr. Reeves says to Anne to stay calm, meaning stay relaxed. Don't get excited. Unfortunately, they have some very bad news. They learn from Bill that Sarah is dead and that her body was found in front of the apartment building. Bill says that before he called the kidnappers, and he was supposed to call the kidnappers and leave them money, the ransom money, the money to get Sarah back, he decided to call the police and tell the police everything. The kidnappers told him not to call the police, you might remember from our previous episode. Well, Bill is crying because his wife has just been found dead, and Anne, who's Sarah's sister, also is very much affected by this news. She begins to have difficulty walking. In fact, Dr. Reeves says it looked like she was going to fall down, meaning fall on the ground. At the end of this episode, Dr. Reeves says that he has tried his best. He says, I had tried my best, meaning I had done the best that I can. He blamed himself, meaning he said that he was the person who did the wrong thing. He was at fault, we would say. He made a mistake. But he says you can't blame yourself. As he was about to leave, meaning as he was getting ready to leave, he was just going to leave, he looks at the names on the apartment building mailboxes. And he says he got lucky. To get lucky means that something good, something fortunate happens to you. And he says, I couldn't believe my eyes, meaning he looked at something and it was incredible. He doubted it was true. I couldn't believe my eyes. One of the names on the mailboxes was John Costello, the man who had just been killed at the bar. Now we have two bodies to explain John Costello as well as Sarah Salas. That's all we have time for on today's English Through Stories. Remember, our other podcasts can be found at eslaudio.com. TOEFLpod.com, English as a Second Language podcast, as well as our TOEFL podcast at TOEFLpod.com. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you on the next episode of Missing Person. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 11, right on schedule. You're listening to Missing Person on English Through Stories. I'm your host, Jeff McQuillan, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in beautiful Los Angeles, California. In the previous episode, our narrator, Dr. Reeves, tried to find John Costello, the man who tried to injure Anne in a car accident. Dr. Reeves goes to the apartment address that he has for John Costello and finds out that he does not live there anymore. So he decides to go to where John Costello works. Well, unfortunately, when he goes to the bar where John Costello is a bartender, somebody who works serving you or giving you drinks, he discovers right before he comes into the bar gunshots, and when he comes into the bar, the man, John Costello, is dead. Well, he doesn't wait for the police to come around. Instead, he calls Anne and finds out that Bill has called, and Bill had some bad news. Bill, remember, is Sarah Salas, the missing woman, the missing person, her husband. And when Dr. Reeves and Anne go talk to Bill, they find out that, in fact, Sarah was dead. Her body was found. Well, Anne, of course, is very sad, very upset, very unhappy. And Dr. Reeves starts to leave, but before he does, he notices that living in the same apartment as Bill and Sarah Salas is John Costello, the man who was just killed. Now we go on to episode 11, right on schedule. Things were starting to make sense to me now. I was beginning to see what had really happened to Sarah Salas and why she was killed. But I had no proof to show that I was right. I needed to get some real evidence. I went home and rang up Kathy Chang. I asked her to do me a big favor that night. Fortunately, she said yes. Now I was ready. I turned on the television and watched the baseball game. I had some time to kill until it was dark outside. When it was nighttime, I got in my car and started driving. When I got near Bill and Sarah's apartment building, I turned off the lights of my car and parked about a block away. I didn't want anyone to know I was there. It was now 7:30 p.m. I was right on schedule. Very quietly, I walked up the sidewalk in front of the apartment building. I needed to break into Costello's apartment, which was on the first floor. I looked into the apartment through the window. There was a light on. I took out my gun and made sure I had bullets in it. I slowly began to open the front window, which was already cracked open. After about a minute, I got the window open and stepped inside the living room of the apartment. I saw a light on in the kitchen. There was someone in there, and this time it was no cat. I walked to the kitchen door. I needed to surprise the person if I were going to catch him. As I opened the door, I yelled as loud as I could, "Don't move!" The man turned around suddenly. I had guessed right. It was Bill. What are you? Before he could finish his sentence, Bill took the frying pan he was holding and hurled it toward my face. I ducked down, and the pan flew over my head. Bill came at me. He pushed me to the ground and hit me in the stomach. I hit him back in the face. We hit each other several times until I noticed that my gun was now on the floor next to us. I stopped hitting Bill and reached for the gun. But Bill saw what I was doing and jumped up. He grabbed the gun before I could get it in my hands and pointed it at me. "Don't move, Reeves." Bill had a big smile on his face. I was not smiling. "So you figured out the truth, eh?" Bill said. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Reeves? Well, you were right. I did kill Sarah, and now I will get all of her money. But you will just get a bullet in your head. That's your reward for being so smart." Bill looked at me with real hatred. I have seen men kill before. I know the look in their eyes before they kill. I knew that I didn't have much time to think of something. Bill stood in front of me with the gun pointed at my face. Suddenly I remembered the pills I found in Bill and Sarah's bedroom for Bill's bad leg. Now I knew what to do. On this episode of Missing Person, we begin with Professor Reeves, Dr. Reeves, saying that things were starting to make sense to me now. To make sense, S-E-N-S-E, means that you understand it, that something that was confused before is now understandable or clear to you. He said he was beginning to see what happened to Sarah Salas and why she was killed. But he had a problem. He had no proof to show that he was right. Proof, P-R-O-O-F, means that you have some evidence, some data, something that shows or demonstrates that you are correct. So Dr. Reeves decides to ring up Kathy Chang, his old friend at the police department. To ring up, R-I-N-G, up, 2 words, means to call on the telephone. And you actually hear the past tense in the story. I went home and rang up Kathy Chang. R-A-N-G is the past of ring. So he rang up or called Kathy Chang, and he asked her to do him a big favor. The expression is to do me a favor, meaning I want you to do something to help me. She said yes, and he decided to sit down and watch some television because he had some time to kill. The expression to have time to kill means you need to waste time or you have extra time. So you have an appointment, for example, at noon, at 12 p.m., and it's only 11 a.m., and you don't have anything to do. You have some time to kill, some time that you can waste or not spend on anything very useful. Well, he had some time to kill, so he watched a baseball game. And when it was nighttime, and nighttime is all one word, Nightttime, nighttime, he decided to drive over to Bill and Sarah's apartment building. Now remember that this is also the apartment building where John Costello, the man who was killed in the bar, this is also his apartment building. He arrives at the apartment building at 7:30 p.m., and he says, "I was right on schedule." And that, of course, is the name of this episode, Right on Schedule. The expression, 3 words, right, R-I-G-H-T, on schedule, S-C-H-E-D-U-L-E, means that you are on time, that you were planning on being somewhere at a certain time, and you arrived there at exactly that time. So to be right on schedule means that things are going as planned, as you expected. Well, he says he gets out of his car and he walks up to the front of the apartment building. He needs to break into John Costello's apartment. To break into means to go into a place, a house or a building where you do not have permission, like a criminal or a burglar or anyone who wants to steal something from you. They can break into your house or they can break into your car. And the noun, when someone does that, is a break-in. You can say, "I had a break-in last night," meaning someone came into my house or my car without me knowing. Usually it means that you steal something. You take something that isn't yours. Well, when Dr. Reeves got into the apartment, he noticed that there was a light on. And so he takes out his gun and makes sure that he has bullets. Bullets, B-U-L-L-E-T-S, of course, is what a gun shoots. It shoots bullets. That's how it hurts you or kills you. He began to open the front window, which was already cracked open. When we say the window is cracked, C-R-A-C-K-E-D, open, 2 words, we mean that it's open a little bit. It's open a very small amount, very small opening. It's cracked open. Well, he gets inside the apartment, and he sees a light on in the kitchen, and he decides to surprise the person, to catch the person who's in the apartment building, because in the apartment, remember, this is John Costello's apartment, and he's dead, so this is not John Costello. He surprises the man by shouting, "Don't move." And that's what the police would say to someone who was running away or who might run away from them. Don't move, meaning don't go anywhere. Well, the man turns around, and he, of course, is surprised, and he decides to throw a frying pan. A frying pan, F-R-Y-I-N-G, pan, P-A-N, 2 words, is what you use to cook, for example, eggs or fish. You have a pan that you fry, that you put on heat underneath, and you put oil in there, and you cook your food in a frying pan. Well, he throws the frying pan. He actually, in the story, says he hurled it. To hurl, H-U-R-L, means to throw something. Usually it means to throw something at someone else. He hurled it toward Dr. Reeves's face. Well, Dr. Reeves says, I ducked down. To duck, D-U-C-K, as a verb, to duck, means here to kneel or to go down, to move your body down towards the floor, usually in order to avoid being hit. So someone throws something at you, you duck down, you go down towards the floor so that it goes over you and it doesn't hit you. This is also the same word, duck, of course, for the animal that you can eat, duck, D-U-C-K, but as a verb it just means to go down low toward the ground. Well, after the pan missed Dr. Reeves, Bill came at him. To come at someone means that you are running towards them and you plan on hitting them or fighting with them. Well, the two men fight, they hit each other, and suddenly Dr. Reeves sees his gun next to them. He reaches for the gun. To reach for means to put your hand or your arm out to try to get the gun. But Bill gets it before him, and he stands up, and he points the gun at Dr. Reeves. To point a gun means to aim or to put it in your direction so that I can shoot you. Well, now Bill says to Dr. Reeves, so you figured out the truth. To figure out means to discover, of course, to find out. And he says to Dr. Reeves, well, your reward, R-E-W-A-R-D, your reward is going to be a bullet in your head. A reward is like a prize. And of course here, it's not really a prize when someone shoots you in the head. Well, Bill looked at Dr. Reeves with what he describes as real hatred. Hatred, H-A-T-R-E-D, is the noun related to hate, H-A-T-E, and of course it means someone who doesn't like you very much. But at the end of the story, when Dr. Reeves doesn't know what to do, he remembers some pills, some medicine that he found for Bill's bad leg when he was in Bill and Sarah's apartment before. Bad leg, B-A-D, a bad leg here just means an injured leg or a leg that bothers or hurts him or isn't completely healthy. Bill has a bad leg and he takes medicine for the pain. Well, we're not quite sure what Dr. Reeves is going to do, but if you're interested in finding out, come back next week for another edition of English Through Stories. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. We'll see you next time on Missing Person. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development. You're listening to English Through Stories, Missing Person, Episode 12, Kathy to the Rescue. Welcome to Missing Person, Episode 12. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in beautiful Los Angeles, California. This is the final episode of this series, Missing Person. In episode number 11, we found out who had kidnapped and killed Sarah Salas. It was Bill, her husband. Our narrator, Dr. Reeves, goes over to Bill and Sarah's apartment building, and he goes into John Costello. We find out that John Costello, who was a bartender, killed at his work. John Costello lived in the same building as Bill and Sarah, and it was Bill who had killed John Costello as well. At the end of the episode, Dr. Reeves surprises Bill inside the apartment, and they have a fight. And the gun of Dr. Reeves is taken by Bill, and Bill is now going to kill Reeves, Dr. Reeves. But at the end of the episode, Dr. Reeves says that he remembered the pills that he found in Bill and Sarah's apartment for Bill's bad leg. Now, he says, I knew what to do. That's where we pick up episode 12, Kathy to the Rescue. Without thinking another second, I kicked Bill in his right knee. He screamed in pain and fell backwards on his back. The gun fell to the ground. I picked it up and pointed it at Bill. "The game is over, Bill," I said, moving the gun closer to his face. "I know that you killed John Costello, too. Was he your partner in kidnapping Sarah?" Costello was an idiot. He was supposed to kill Anne and then keep quiet. But he told me he wanted more money, or he would tell the police everything he knew. So I had to kill him so he wouldn't blab to the cops. "And you came to Costello's apartment tonight to get rid of any evidence that connected you to him?" I asked. Costello had my name written down on a sheet of paper I gave him. I had to find the paper and get rid of it. Just then I heard a knock on the door, and someone came in. It was Kathy Chang. "Kathy, right on time," I said. "Did you call the police?" "Yes. They are on their way here right now. I have a camera person from the television station outside. We're ready to report the story." The police arrived a few minutes later and arrested Bill Salas for the murder of his wife and John Costello. Anne would be devastated, of course, but at least now she would know the truth. Now it was really over, and the murderer had been found. A week later, I met Kathy at her apartment for our usual dinner. Of course, she wanted to know all about the case of Sarah Salas's kidnapping. We talked over a wonderful meal of baked chicken. "I understand that Bill killed his wife, Sarah, for her money," Kathy said. "But how much money was he going to get?" "Bill had a $2 million life insurance policy on Sarah," I responded. "Bill would get $2 million plus half of the money from Pardo Computers." "And how was John Costello involved in this whole thing?" "John Costello lived in the same apartment building as Bill and Sarah," I said. "He moved in a few months ago and became friends with Bill. But John liked to go to Las Vegas and gamble. He also liked to smoke and drink. So he needed money, lots of money. And Bill gave him a chance to make a lot of money by helping him kidnap Sarah," Kathy said. "Exactly. Bill told John he would give him $500,000 if he helped him kidnap Sarah. But how did they take Sarah? Where did they keep her? Bill planned everything out very carefully, I explained. He told John Costello to call Sarah on the phone to ask her for some help with his computer. When she got there, John tied her up and kept her in his room. Bill left Los Angeles for 2 days in a rented car so people would think that both he and Sarah had disappeared. And it worked. Anne called the police because she thought that both Bill and Sarah were in trouble. That's when Anne asked me for help. What went wrong with Bill's perfect plan then? The problem was that John Costello wasn't a very good helper, I said. He was supposed to kill Anne on the freeway, but he didn't. Then he told Bill that if Bill didn't give him more money, he would tell the police about the kidnapping. That's when Bill decided to kill Costello, to make sure Costello didn't tell the police? Exactly. He went to the bar where Costello worked and killed him, I said. Then he went back to Costello's apartment to kill his wife. He cut her throat and put her body in the street. But when I discovered that John Costello lived in the same apartment building, I knew it was no coincidence. And that's how I figured it out. I took a drink of wine and looked at Kathy. She really was a very beautiful woman. Well, let's not think about Anne or Bill or John Costello, Kathy said. She smiled and raised her glass of wine. Perhaps I've been working too hard on this case. I've forgotten the simple pleasures of life. It was time to spend more time on the good things in life, like a good glass of wine, a good meal, and Kathy's wonderful smile. In this final episode of Missing Person, called Kathy to the Rescue, we find out how the story ends. First, the title of this episode, Kathy to the Rescue. To rescue someone, R-E-S-C-U-E, to rescue means to save them from trouble, to help them when they are in danger or they need help. So Kathy to the rescue means that Kathy is going to come and help. And in this case, it's to help Darren Reeves, our narrator. The story begins in the middle of a fight where Bill and Dr. Reeves are fighting. Bill has a gun, and he is pointing the gun at Dr. Reeves. Dr. Reeves remembers that Bill has a bad leg, so he decides to kick Bill's bad leg in the knee. The knee, of course, K-N-E-E, is what connects the two bones in your leg, or the two main bones in your leg. So he kicks Bill. Bill screams in pain and falls backwards. To fall backwards means that if you are standing up, when you fall down, you are on your back. If you were to fall forwards, you would end up on your face. You would be on your face on the ground. But he falls backwards on his back. The gun falls to the ground, the gun that Bill was holding, and Dr. Reeves picks it up, and now Dr. Reeves points the gun at Bill and says to him, "The game is over," meaning this is it. Your time of being a criminal is over. The game is over. I have figured out what has happened. and there is no more continuing. Dr. Reeves says, I know that you killed John Costello. Was he your partner in kidnapping Sarah? Your partner, Partner, someone who you work with in this case, someone who is helping you. Well, Bill says that Costello was an idiot. He was stupid. He was supposed to kill Anne on the freeway when he ran into Anne's car. But he wanted more money, and so he told Bill that he would blab to the cops if he didn't get more money. To blab, B-L-A-B, means to talk to. It's an informal way of saying he's going to tell the police some secrets. To blab is usually used when you have a secret and you tell someone else that you're not supposed to. Well, then Bill decided to kill Costello, and he went to Costello's apartment to get rid of any evidence. To get rid of means to destroy, to throw away, to get rid, R-I-D, of any evidence. And here evidence is proof, something that would show that Bill and John Costello were partners. Costello had written down Bill's name on a sheet of paper. A sheet of paper, S-H-E-E-T, is the same as a piece of paper. He had to find this paper and get rid of it, he said. Then Kathy Chang knocks on the door during this story, and Bill says, Kathy, right on time. To be on time means to arrive at the right moment, to arrive when you are supposed to. So right on time means the same as exactly on time. You are here when I expected you to be here. Well, Dr. Reeves asks Kathy if she called the police, and she said yes. They are on their way. To be on your way means you are traveling. You are going to a particular place. Kathy, of course, is a reporter, and she says she has a camera person from the television station outside. Well, the police arrive, and they arrested Bill Salas. To arrest, A-R-R-E-S-T, means the police take you and bring you to the jail. And then you are going to have to defend yourself in a court where you have a judge and lawyers and so forth. Well, they arrested Bill Salas for the murder of his wife and for the murder of John Costello, his partner. Well, Anne, of course, Sarah's sister, is going to be devastated, says Dr. Reeves. Devastate, D-E-V-A-S-T-A-T-E-D. To devastate means to destroy, to ruin, to completely take something and take it apart so there is nothing left. A storm, for example, a hurricane or a tornado can destroy, can devastate something. It can completely eliminate it. Well, here, Anne would be devastated means that she's going to be very sad, that she's going to be extremely upset, and it's going to be something that's going to bother her. Of course, finding out her sister had been murdered by her brother-in-law. Well, then a week later, we find that Dr. Reeves and Kathy get together, and they sit down to talk about what had happened to Sarah Salas. And here we get a review of the story. We find out that Bill killed his wife, Sarah, because Sarah had a lot of money, and because Bill had a $2 million life insurance policy. Life insurance is when you pay a company money, and an insurance policy is something that helps you if something goes wrong. And a life insurance policy is money you get when someone dies. Well, he had a $2 million life insurance policy, plus he got half of the money from the computer company. Remember, Anne and Sarah own their parents' computer company. John Costello was involved, we find out, because he was a neighbor of Bill and Sarah, and he agreed to kidnap Sarah so that he could get some money as well. But unfortunately, things didn't work out. John Costello called Sarah on the phone, and to get her into his apartment, he says he needs some help on his computer. And when Sarah arrives, when she arrives, John tied her up. To tie someone up means that you take some rope and you put it around their arms and their legs so they can't move, so they can't leave. Well, he ties up Sarah, and Bill leaves Los Angeles so that Anne thinks that they have both been kidnapped. Unfortunately, John Costello was not a very good helper. A helper, H-E-L-P-E-R, of course, someone who helps. The plan was for John Costello to kill Anne on the freeway, but he didn't do that. And so, because he wanted more money, Bill decided to kill John as well. Dr. Reeves discovered this when he found out that John Costello lived in the same apartment building as Bill and Sarah Salas. He says, "I knew it was no coincidence." A coincidence, C-O-I-N-C-I-D-E-N-C-E, a coincidence is when two things happen at the same time. Usually it is just by chance. It isn't planned. It just happens. But this, he said, was no coincidence, meaning it was planned. It was something that someone had decided to do. Well, at the end of the story, we find out that Dr. Reeves still thinks Kathy is a beautiful woman, is still attracted to her, it seems. He and Kathy share a glass of wine. Kathy raises her glass of wine. To raise means to lift up in the air. And Dr. Reeves says that he has forgotten the simple pleasures of life, meaning the simple things that make life good. And one of those simple things is Kathy's wonderful smile. So we can expect, I suppose, Dr. Reeves and Kathy perhaps now to have another romantic relationship. We end on a happy note this episode and this series of Missing Person. From Los Angeles, I'm Jeff McQuillan. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on English Through Stories. English Through Stories is a production of the Center for Educational Development in Los Angeles, California. This program may not be resold or redistributed without the express written permission of the Center for Educational Development.